Yeah. Okay, so welcome everybody to this webinar on the Sri Lanka crisis and the impact on the agroecology debates and what are the lessons to be learned from it. We welcome you all today for joining us. So I will quickly make some announcements on interpretations. Today we have interpretations in Hindi, Spanish, and English. One of our panelists will speak in Spanish, so that can also be translated into English and Hindi. For interpretations, you click on the round icon on the Zoom screen below and click on whichever language you want it to be interpreted. आज के इस वेबिनार में हिंदी अनुवाद भी उपलब्ध है। अनुवाद के लिए आप आपके जूम स्क्रीन के नीचे जो गोल आइकन है उस पर क्लिक करके हिंदी में क्लिक कर सकते हैं। This webinar today is being organized by People's Health Movement. PHM is a global network bringing together grassroots health activists, civil society organizations, and academic institutions from across the world, particularly from low and middle income countries. One of the 6 thematic groups in PHM is the nutrition and food sovereignty, which is also hosting this webinar today. The vision of this group is the creation of an equitable and fair food system based on the inalienable rights of people to food and adequate nutrition. We will have Vandana Prasad moderating today, and we have 4 speakers after her. Dr. Vandana is a pediatrician by training. She is a long-time member of health and food security movements in India. Currently, she is the technical advisor to Public Health Resource Network, which works in different states of India for advocacy on nutrition and public health systems strengthening. Thank you, Vandana, for agreeing to moderate today. I'll give it to you now.
Thank you so much, Deepika, and a very warm welcome to all of you for being part of this important webinar. And special welcome to the panelists who've taken time to prepare for this webinar and to be amongst us. We have a stellar list of people amongst us from different countries. They're all experts in their own rights and very well known. And we shall hear from them one by one. So we have representation from Sri Lanka, of course, from Argentina, from India and Bangladesh, as the people contributing as experts and panelists. The way things are going to go today, just very briefly before I introduce the main speaker of the evening, is like this. Oh, I know it's not evening everywhere because we have people attending, I see, from all over the world, really. And thank you so much, all the attendees, for being here. It's really very important for us that you're here. We shall hope that we'll be able to enable some sort of participation from the attendees as well. So we shall start with the main presentation from Sri Lanka, followed by a panel discussion from the representatives from Argentina, India, and Bangladesh. Before we start, just a few words on the context, which I think is, if you're here this evening, it's very likely that you're very familiar with, the topic for today's discussion. As we know, the mainstream policies across the world in the neo-capitalist world are to push for large-scale industrial farming, industrial animal husbandry, and so on and so forth, which depends upon large concentrations of capital, large concentrations of land, depend upon big business, creating kind of power concentrations, and all that implies for the rest of the world, what that implies for inequality and inequity in particular, what it also implies for sovereignty on food security as well as of economics. So this is the context in which many of us have been arguing, fighting, struggling for an alternative food system. An alternative food system that really is distinguished by some key features. It is in our vision, it is a decentralized food system. It is one that depends upon local processes and products and produce. And so therefore, the value chains are short value chains rather than global. It's a sustainable food system which protects the environment and the ecology and maintains it, as well as provides nutritious food. I think this element is also very important, that this would enhance food diversity, dietary diversity, nutritious food, and definitely breaks into the inequality, the enormous and serious inequality, the economic inequality of our times. So this is a vision that all of us have been working for. The critique of this vision, generally speaking, has been twofold. One is this able to go to scale? Will we be able to feed the world? Is it viable? But more importantly, what would it take to make it happen? I mean, these are the questions that we need to answer. Now, in this context and in this debate and discussion, something very important has happened in Sri Lanka. It's very important because at a national level, the issue has been taken seriously enough to institute certain policy directions. So that is the importance of what has happened in Sri Lanka. This and other things, or at least some interpretation is that this has contributed to the severe economic crisis that Sri Lanka is currently facing. And that itself has led to a kind of backlash upon the system or upon the advocacy for agroecology. So it is in this context that this webinar was decided upon by the People's Health Movement, because we're all struggling with the fallout of the Sri Lanka experience, and we need to understand it better. There are lots of rumors and lots of hypotheses floating around in the world about what really happened. And in that context, the main presentation today will be from Sri Lanka, essentially to take us through what happened, to take us through the analysis of what has happened and what the implications are for ecology in the world as well as in Sri Lanka itself. So now let me just quickly introduce the first speaker, the main speaker for the day. We have Dr. Lionel Weerakoon with us. He is an expert in sustainable agriculture and agroforestry and has really worked with the government of Sri Lanka in many different contexts to be able to facilitate movement towards agroecology. He's a research scientist. He has an long academic career in teaching sustainable agriculture and so on and so forth. I'm not going to go into detailed introductions for anybody. It would take too much time. They are there in the chat box for anybody who wants to know the speakers in greater detail. So I invite Dr. Lionel to speak. We'll be speaking for about 15 to 20 minutes, as I said, to take us through what exactly happened and his analysis of what happened, what the implications are. So welcome, Dr. Lionel. Please, somebody help to unmute Dr. Lionel. Deepika, maybe you could do that. Dr. Lionel, you will have to unmute yourself. Find the mic button and just press on it, please. Deepika, could you assist?
Yeah, I'm trying. I'm not able to directly unmute him.
Dr. Lionel, can you hear me? There's a little red button that looks like a mic with a slash across it. Can you just press it with your cursor or get somebody to assist you? Deepika, as host, you should be able to.
Yeah, no, it's not allowing me. Dr. Lionel, below on the left-hand side, there's a mute icon. Just see if you can click on it.
Looks like a mic. It looks like a mic. Just press on it, please.
He's getting help, yeah.
Okay. Well, while he's enabling that, and perhaps we should have practiced this when he had come on. Maybe I'm going to just directly give the panelists a word each, just before we start, on the context of Sri Lanka, what we're really expecting to hear, while Dr. Lionel prepares to unmute himself. So maybe I start with Marcos. Marcos is a human rights and food sovereignty lawyer. He is also an important part of the thematic circle for nutrition and food sovereignty in the People's Health Movement. And he has, he's a member of the network of free chairs on food sovereignty, the network of lawyers for food sovereignty, the Hunger Museum, and so on and so forth. So he's playing a role in global advocacy on these issues. And Farida Akhtar is from Bangladesh. Let me just introduce her as well. She's the founding executive director of UBI-NIG, which basically translates to policy research for development alternative. She's also the organizer of Naya Krishi Andolan. I think people in the health movement know her very well for her work with biodiversity, working with farmers, women's farmers, and she's been, at it since the 1980s, a very well-known food rights activist for us. Dr. Raman Janeulu from the Center for Sustainable Agriculture is the executive director. He's of the Center for Sustainable Agriculture. He's an agricultural scientist, and he has been associated with several large-scale initiatives on agroecology in India. So currently he's working with over 100,000 farmers and 65 FPOs, farmer producer organizations, trying to link farmers with markets. He's also linked with the Krishna Sudha Academy for Agroecology, which is a research and education center. So welcome to all the panelists. Let me just start with Marcos. Marcos, any initial thoughts on what we're really wanting from this webinar and what we're really trying to understand, or anything that you'd like to say at this point of time while we wait for Lionel?
Dr. Lionel is also unmuted now.
He's unmuted now. Hello, Dr. Lionel, are you with us? I still don't hear him. Deepika, I suggest you make a phone call.
No, he's unmuted, but he can't speak. Yeah, I'll do that. You continue.
Yeah, so perhaps you just do this on the side, make a phone call. I see that he's muted on my screen. It looks muted to me. So you need to get this sorted. Yeah. Yes, so over to you, Marcos.
Bueno, buenos días a todas y a todos. Muchas gracias, Vandana, muchas gracias al Movimiento para la Salud de los Pueblos por organizar este importante webinario, y en particular a Deepika por hacerlo posible. Yo vengo de Argentina, un país que está a 15.000 kilómetros de Sri Lanka, y realmente se conoce muy poco en general sobre Sri Lanka, es muy poca la información que tenemos sobre Sri Lanka, y sin embargo, en el último año Sri Lanka ha estado presente muy fuertemente en los medios de comunicación. La crisis de Sri Lanka se ha visibilizado, y vemos que eso ha sido en parte gracias a la influencia del conglomerado de empresas químicas que controlan los insumos del modelo agroindustrial dominante impuesto en nuestro país. Y en ese sentido, quisiera contarles muy brevemente que Argentina ha sido la puerta de entrada de los transgénicos a América Latina, ya en el año 1996, inaugurando un modelo que llamamos modelo de agronegocio transgénico, dependiente de venenos, dependiente de agrotóxicos. Desde la introducción de la soja en 1996 a esta parte, se le ha dado autorización a 66 eventos transgénicos distintos. Hoy Argentina es el tercer país productor mundial de transgénicos, después de Estados Unidos y después de Brasil. El 80% de la superficie cultivada de nuestro país está destinada a transgénicos dependientes de venenos, destinados principalmente a la exportación, es decir, no para atender a las necesidades alimentarias de nuestro pueblo. Hoy el 100% prácticamente de la soja en nuestro país es transgénica, el 96% del maíz es transgénico, el 100% del algodón es transgénico. Tenemos 2 papas transgénicas resistentes a virosis, un cártamo con expresión de quimosina, y como si esto fuera poco, este año el gobierno le ha dado autorización comercial al primer evento de trigo transgénico en el mundo, ¿no? Un trigo transgénico que es, y dice ser resistente a la sequía, y esto no se dice tanto, es tolerante a un herbicida muy tóxico llamado glufosinato de amonio. Cuando se introdujeron los transgénicos en nuestro país, vinieron con 2 promesas bajo el brazo. La primera era que eran necesarias estas tecnologías, reitero, inauditas, ¿no? Solamente tenían aprobación en Estados Unidos unos meses antes, para acabar con el hambre en el mundo, ¿no? Este fin tan loable repetido una y otra vez. Bueno, 26 años después de su aprobación, el hambre en el mundo no solo no ha disminuido, sino que ha aumentado. Y no solamente ha aumentado el hambre a nivel global, sino que ha aumentado el hambre en nuestro propio país, que hemos prorrogado una emergencia alimentaria vigente desde el año 2002. Es decir, llevamos 20 años de emergencia alimentaria en nuestro país, en el que coexisten niveles alarmantes de desnutrición aguda, de desnutrición crónica y sobrepeso y obesidad que esconde carencias nutricionales. Y la segunda promesa con la que se impusieron los transgénicos en nuestro país es que iban a reducir el uso de los agrotóxicos, porque los agrotóxicos que se usaban hasta ese momento iban a ser eliminados, según se prometía, por estas semillas mágicas que al ser tolerantes al herbicida glifosato, iban a reducir el uso de los agrotóxicos. Bueno, sucedió todo lo contrario. Desde 1996 a esta parte, el incremento en los agrotóxicos ha sido del 1500%. 1500%. Hoy estamos usando una media de 600 millones de litros, kilos de agrotóxicos por año, situándonos en el triste privilegio de ser el país que más agrotóxicos por persona por año utiliza en el mundo. De más de 5.000 formulados comerciales distintos, ¿no?, que son introducidos al ambiente, y este incremento en el uso de los agrotóxicos y también en el uso de los fertilizantes sintéticos derivados de combustibles fósiles, que también se ha incrementado en un 1500%, ha tenido y tiene devastadoras consecuencias en nuestros territorios. En primer lugar, se han transformado los modos de vivir y de morir en los territorios como consecuencia de este modelo de agronegocio transgénico, este modelo agroindustrial dominante, veneno dependiente, impuesto a nuestros territorios. Han aumentado los cánceres, porque muchos de los productos que se utilizan son cancerígenos, entre ellos el más utilizado, el glifosato, más de 350, 400 millones de litros son solo de glifosato. Han aumentado las enfermedades neurodegenerativas, Alzheimer, Parkinson, autismo, dado que muchos de los productos que se utilizan son neurotóxicos o son liposolubles y se adhieren al tejido graso del cerebro y del cerebelo. Enfermedades del sistema endocrino, particularmente hipotiroidismo, porque muchos de los productos que se utilizan son disruptores endocrinos, enfermedades de la piel, enfermedades respiratorias, trastornos de fertilidad tanto masculinos como femeninos, abortos espontáneos y malformaciones, porque muchos de los productos que se utilizan son teratogénicos. Y esos agrotóxicos que se utilizan en esa cantidad y en esa variedad en nuestro país no afectan solamente a los trabajadores y a los pueblos rurales fumigados que conviven cotidianamente con la exposición ambiental aguda y crónica a los agrotóxicos.
Thanks, Marcos.
Sino que están presentes
I think that
en el agua.
It's really great that you have told us about the situation in Argentina. I think maybe all the panelists can just talk a little bit about our own countries, what's going on. Very important. And I think the one key thing that you said, I hope people didn't have problems with interpretation. This was the first time. But I didn't see anything in the chat box. So I hope that worked for everybody. So basically, just to point out that, you know, Argentina is a country where things that we are trying to stop in our own countries has already been experienced. That's the value of this experience that Marcos was raising, that GMs have been used for 26 years and have not ended hunger. I think that's really something that really stood out for me. And they're also seeing the toxic, things that we are only guessing at, and trying to say that this is toxic and please don't do it. But they're already seeing those impacts. So that was very useful. I think very quickly, because I think Dr. Lionel is back with us. So very quickly, just a couple of lines, if I can give to Farida and Dr. Ramu also, to just reflect on what has been happening in Bangladesh, what the status is, and then I will shift to. Sorry, I spoke into the mic when I was not intending to. My apologies.
Shall I?
Yes, Farida, please.
Okay. Thank you very much, and I hope we are actually very much eager to hear Dr. Lionel, and I'm very interested to know his analysis. But as a country in South Asia, every day we are hearing, is Bangladesh going to become like Sri Lanka? Or, because the price rise, the corruption, the failure of the neoliberal policies, the development failures, and all these chaotic conditions, particularly corruption of the regime, is so much familiar, when we are hearing about Sri Lanka. So although I think, many of us who are practicing agroecology, we call it Nayakrishi in Bangladesh, and they appreciated the policy that Rajapaksa, I think the brother of Gotabaya, who declared, to be for agroecological policy to shift to agroecology. We appreciated that because this is one country in South Asia at least is trying to do that. We are doing on our own in Bangladesh at a micro level, but if it happens at the state level, government level, it will be good. So we appreciated that. So the ban on fertilizer, when it became the issue, as if it has led to the fall of the government and all these chaotic conditions. We feel, and our analysis is that it is actually trying to bypass the failure of the neoliberal economic policies and the mismanagement of the corrupt rulers, not only the rulers, but also the international agencies who made them do all these things. For example, the Green Revolution. So, I don't know how much time I can take now.
Yeah, I think that's fine for now, Farida. We'll come back to you. Please.
One line to say that, I think it is also the media very much, which is projecting more the corporate interest by saying that agroecology is the cause of the chaos in Sri Lanka. So that I think we have to talk about also. Thank you.
Right. I think that's a very, very important point, the role that the media is playing across the globe. And you've raised many other important issues, which I think, Dr. Lionel, the panelists are reflecting upon what we already have some sense of, so that you can respond to that in your presentation. So very quickly, Dr. Ramu, if you could, we'll just hear from Dr. Ramu, Dr. Lionel, and then the floor will be yours. So Dr. Ramu, just preliminary, words about India, what's happening here.
Thank you very much for giving me this opportunity. We keep hearing about Sri Lanka and its lack of preparedness to handle the crisis which it faced with. I think the biggest lesson India should learn is we should not reach that stage of handling the problem when it is at peak and without setting up alternatives. Because in India also, fertilizer use is going up significantly. Already the fertilizer subsidy has reached 200,000 crores. And government and the estimation now shows that it will be increasing by another 70% by end of the year. So phase-wise, step-wise, setting up alternatives is something which is very, very critical. So there's a lot to learn from Sri Lankan experience in terms of how we can prepare ourselves. And there are a lot of initiatives began in India as well. So we'll also, when I share, I'll share more about the Indian experiences in dealing with this problem. But I think it's a very timely to understand the analysis of the problem. Thank you very much.
Thank you so much, Dr. Ramu. And I think that your point about adequate planning and, the roadmap to this transition that would need to happen between current systems, food systems and systems of agriculture, and the transition to agroecological systems, that's very important. So now we shall hear Dr. Lionel, and I'm sure that he will be responding to all the points that the panelists have already raised. So the floor is over to you, Dr. Lionel. Welcome again, and I'm sorry that you faced a little bit of difficulty.
Yeah, sorry, Vandana. Thank you very much for inviting me to this Zoom discussion on agroecology crisis in Sri Lanka and the lessons learned and also the impacts. Can you hear me now? All right, okay. Now, as you all know that the Sri Lanka, we have been practicing green technology and its package for the last 7 decades. And after many years of practicing this technology, we came across many problems emerge during last 15, 20 years. Now I'll give you a few examples like high cost of production that happened all over, and also falling market prices for farmers, and mainly the degradation of natural resource base, especially soil fertility, soil moisture, biodiversity, etc. I don't want to elaborate on that. And as a result, heavy erosion, soil erosion occurred in our farms. And pollution of water is another thing. And siltation is one. Then pesticide residues and weedicides. They're all with water, moved to water bodies and deposited over there. And also the fertilizer. As you know, all the fertilizers we use in agriculture dissolve in water totally, and finally end up in water bodies. And if that water is used by the farmers, causing health hazards to them. One of them was chronic kidney disease spread in many parts of the country, northern, north central, eastern province, and north central and northwest, four provinces. And every day it was reported 13 people, especially the farmers, died because of CKDU. It has become an eye-opener to Sri Lankan governments. And by 2009, around that time, this was revealed and this was tested by many people. And also at the same time, WHO recommended Sri Lanka to ban all the pesticides and weedicides that is suspected having CKDU contents. So in 2013 and 2014, Register of Pesticides in the Department of Agriculture banned legally and stated that should not be imported to Sri Lanka 15 such pesticides in the country. One of them was glyphosate. So, and it was suspected that glyphosate is the main culprit for this one, the CKDU. And it was not proved, but still that suspicion is there. And based on that, government of Sri Lanka at that time, that was in 2015, wanted to have a organic Sri Lanka and insisted the conventional agriculture should be transformed to organic agriculture or agroecology within a period of 3 to 4 years. So which that government at that time, 2015, established an organization called SEMA, that is Strategic Enterprise Management Agency, to undertake this responsibility. And they couldn't do much, but still they had done 3 important things. One was to recruit knowledgeable field officers to give the training to the farmers in several districts on how to prepare these substitutions instead of fertilizer, like compost, organic fertilizers, liquid fertilizers, and also liquid microbial cultures. So that was done by this team, but the team was very small, about 10. So they couldn't do much in the country. And the problem was that they didn't get the support from the Department of Agriculture for any reason. So they were sidelined by this team, by this organization. That's one mistake done by our people without convincing the mainstream organization who do all the work, agriculture, in the country. Then the other one was that they give the training. Then also this team, they did field trials to compare the biofertilizers available in the market. What are the performances of them? And that was also done during that period. It was a very short period, but finally what happened was that within 3 years, that the SEMA was terminated its work, and there was a lull period until the next election comes. Next election was held in 2020, and during that time, I could still remember the leader of the opposition in public, he pressed that once its government come into power, they will give fertilizer free of charge. Free of charge. Fertilizer from abroad, give here without money to the farmers. So the farmers who started this program, organic agriculture, they stopped it halfway because they were expecting free fertilizer so that they can use it for agriculture without any much effort. That was the first attempt. And there, we don't say fail. We still say we have the technology. It's perfected. We have very good results. We have seen it in the field. But this is a decision by the politicians, not by the mainstream, not by the farmers. Farmers are not involved, but they were like the guinea pigs to get these things done. Then the second time, that was in 2020, the opposition leader, they came into power with 2/3 majority. And they have all the power to change the country. The president of Sri Lanka, Mr. Gotabaya Rajapaksa, wanted to continue this organic agriculture program. So that's a very positive point which I want to raise. Actually, he's not a politician. That's, I think, why he took this decision. And in 2021, April, he submitted a cabinet paper stating that importation of fertilizer and pesticides will be totally stopped from the stop overnight. So that was gazetted in 2001, May 6th, and that was implemented from that from that onwards, and no inorganic fertilizer in the country afterwards. That was I think it's a mistake, because now 2015, the president at that time, he gave the option for farmers, and he gave cash for those who want to implement organic agriculture. That farmers can use that money and implement organic agriculture program. And also at the same time, those who want to use inorganic fertilizer. They can use this cash. So cash is given, not subsidy, not free of charge. He said it's the only option that we could have two at the moment until we convert the whole system to agroecology. But here, the mistake was they stopped importing inorganic fertilizer and only insisted that the farmers should practice organic agriculture. And the other mistake done was that he appointed an expert panel to implement this program. And of them, 90% are businessmen. So they don't know anything about agroecology or sustainable agriculture or organic agriculture. What happened was they selected or they identified some of the farmers, some of the companies who produce compost. To me, compost is no fertilizer. It's a conditioner or a substrate to grow microbes. So that what happened was they collected compost from all these places at a price given by the government. They give the money by the government and distributed this among the farmers free of charge. Compost was given free of charge. So by the time they came to know that the materials are not enough, so they took the decision to import fertilizer from other countries. One such was nano fertilizer from India. They imported nano fertilizer, nano urea from India, and distributed among the farmers. The second was they got down or imported from China organic fertilizer, and that was rejected by the Director General of the Department of Agriculture because it's contained quite a large amounts of pathogens, Erwinia, coliform, and all that. So that was stopped. So that happened because the decisions are taken by the outsiders. Like it's not it's a government program, but implemented through private sector. Now these were the some debacles. I mean the problems what the country faced. So in general, we can say that Sri Lanka, the government had any concrete national level planning for implementation of island-wide program in the country. So it was given to some other people. And also and the second point is that even in 2015 and 2021, both situations, they never got the involvement of the Department of Agriculture, who actually, their mandate is to promote agriculture. It doesn't say what agriculture. It may be because of the mandate given at that time by the government was to implement inorganic, the conventional agriculture in the country. But now this time the government changed its policy. So they would have given the full responsibility to the Department of Agriculture. We have very good scientists, and also we have a very good infrastructure there. Research and development is with them, training and the education and training under them, and also extension services is also under the Department of Agriculture. Without consulting them, they want to do all these things. Without the Department of Agriculture, without the using of their infrastructure. This is what happened. So these are political decisions. So this is the reason for failure. The other thing is that the experts, I said, as I told you, they are not, there were some scientists, but in some other fields, all the others are businessmen. And the other thing is that the compost distributed on farmers were not of good quality. Every day they were complaining that the compost they got are totally either sand or silt or some other debris containing all that. So they couldn't get the expected yields. That was a big thing to the country. The farmers grow food for the country. So now here, that affected the national food security. No food. All the prices are gone up. Rice, vegetables, including eggs and chicken, meat, because no maize. Maize is also grown in a very small area because of the lack of fertilizer. All these things are affected because of the wrong decisions taken by the government. So now the problem has come to the cabinet. We don't have dollars. Coffers are empty now. The government of the treasury is printing rupees, money, Sri Lankan money, to pay the salaries of the government servants. That is a pathetic situation. And the people came to streets. They started hunger campaigns, protest campaigns, agitations, and finally they turned to violence. And the only claim is both the president and his brother, the prime minister, should resign the post and vacate the post and go back home. Go back home, go back home. That was the slogan. So this is what happened. So the decisions were taken. And the other pathetic thing is that the left parties, they were at the beginning very supportive for organic agriculture. With this situation, they took the other side. We expected, at least they were going against multinationals, anti-imperialism. Those are the words used by them. But this is actually anti-imperialism or anti-neoliberal movement like agroecology. So they had taken the other side. So that is another mistake done by the people themselves. Now we have at least few farmers who got the training by the knowledge, and now this is a good situation. I mean, this is a good opportunity for them to organize themselves and become a force in the country, an independent force in the country, without dividing into different political parties. We are fed up with the parties now. Sri Lankans are fed up with elections, and they want a new system. And this is what the people want, especially the youths in the country. So I was in the Department of Agriculture for quite a long time, and we took decisions in the favor of the country and the farmers. But here it's for the multinationals, local businessmen, and so Therefore, we say that the agriculture in the country at the moment is politicized. And we need to change it. The people want a change, the system change. This is what they are asking. So I say that at least these farmers who are practicing, who are at the moment practicing, there should be a way to bring them together as a force in the country to make some opinion and also to convince the government they can implement organic agriculture in the country, like Cuba or any other, most of the South American countries. They are practicing the campesina, technology transfer from one farmer to another farm. I think that's the best way to Sri Lanka. Government and get the Department of Agriculture. They have very good people. I was in the Department of Agriculture. Very good people, knowledgeable people. They won't have a change. But these people, they all are sideline. This is what happened. Finally, I would say, before the conclusion of my talk, I think I took more than the given time. And I would say that we now depend totally on the farmers. They should be protected and they should give the due place in the country. Let them take the leadership, and how to do it and when to do it, where to do it is still a problem. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Dr. Weerakoon. I think you have raised many, many critical issues and they resonate with all of us. I'm going to go straight away to the panelists to respond to what they have heard. And if any clarifications are needed from Dr. Lionel, that can also be placed. So Dr. Lionel, please be part of the panel. I'll go in the opposite direction now. So if Dr. Ramu, would you like to start?
Yes, thank you very much. It was indeed a better analysis rather than reading from the newspapers, because many times when we read in the newspapers, it is an opinion, not from experience, but mostly an opinion from the corporate side, which was projected. And yeah, as the analysis clearly points out, there was no transition plan. And they started acting only when the crisis reached its peak. And when the choices before the government were very little. So except for the ban on fertilizers, there was no much choices with the government. I think that's one lesson I would say we need to draw from that. Second very important lesson I would draw from this is not planning transition in the institutional structures as well. So Department of Agriculture, agricultural research itself being the key decision makers and not carrying them with them, nor making an effort in changing the way they understand issues. I think that is another very important lesson we need to draw from that. Third important transition plan which is required is also looking at how people can understand and make the transition at the farmers level, and what support services are required for the farmers to make the transition. It could be about inputs, it could be about knowledge, it could be about markets, many things which we need to redesign, which was not done as well. So like Lionel was mentioning about just importing compost from China makes no sense. Whether it is importing fertilizer or importing compost, it really makes no sense, because you are depending on external resources. So how much we can internalize the resources into the local farming systems as well as into the national resources is something which is very important. So working towards that was something which was very, very, very much required, which was missing, and I think that's a bigger lesson we should learn from Sri Lanka. And looking from an Indian point of view, in India also we are moving towards the same situation. Our fertilizer productivity have gone down significant levels. Looking at various records from Sri Lanka, it's the same situation. In 1970s, a kg of fertilizer used to give around 13 kg of grains. And today it is only 2.4 kg. So that's a reduction in the fertilizer use efficiency, and then the productivity. So factor productivity of fertilizers have gone down significantly. The subsidy has gone up significantly. Today we are spending nearly 200,000 crores. And expectation is that it will go up to 400,000 crores by end of this year. And given that kind of situation, and then the more than 70% goes into the environment and then damages the environment, be it nitrous oxide emissions damaging the in forms of greenhouse gases, or in terms of nitrates in water making it unpotable. So the problem with conventional agriculture is very well known, but transition needs plan, and transition needs support, transition needs investments, which is not being done. Without doing that, just expecting that the transition will happen on its own, and farmers make transition if there's a ban put in, is not going to work. The experience of Sikkim shows that government has invested over 10 years for making the transition to happen. So today, Sikkim is really doing well. Andhra Pradesh has put in more than 10 years effort, and then today we have about 10 to 15% area under transition. So I think that kind of transition approach, we need to make a plan. And lastly, one very important thing when we talk about science, since the left party's issue was brought up, I keep seeing left interprets science as a Western science. And whatever is told by Western science is equated with the modern science, and what they are now talking about is a 70 years old science, and the 70 years old science trying to solve today's problem is not going to happen. So politicizing some of these things is really bad. I think there should be a better understanding they also need to make. And in Indian situation, another important dimension I want to bring up. In India, there is also a clash in terms of trying to bring back traditions. And tradition varies with communities. So my tradition is very different from your tradition. And trying to bring back one tradition and then put it all over, I think is a serious problem. And saying that 1,000 years old knowledge will solve today's problem is much more bad than talking about 70 years old science solving the problem. So I think it is not about going back 70 years or 1,000 years, which is important. It is about going forward. So in moving forward, what knowledge is required, what support for farmers is required, and then how do we design the institutional systems is very important, whether it is about agricultural research, or it's about whether it is about extension services, markets. We need to create these new systems for the new problems and then new solutions. Agroecology is the way forward, but not the way it is implemented in Sri Lanka, nor the way it is now trying to push by Indian government. I would say we need to have much more wider debate on this in terms of creating an alternative pathways. Thank you.
Thank you, Ramu. I think that was very, very important and useful. And you have raised some new issues about, how politics misuses issues such as technology or tradition, and they all mean different things to different people. And finally, solutions are compromised because in some sense, the ideology is of paramount importance. So thank you for that. So Farida, over to you.
Yeah, whichever way, direction you do, I fall in the middle.
Yes.
So
I don't know, that may not be a bad thing.
No problem. So before going to Argentina, I think, one thing, I was listening very carefully to Dr. Lionel, and, and also I have heard others also speak at some PHM meetings from Sri Lanka, the situation. So one thing to for those who are attending today's webinar, I want to say that sometimes it looks like that we are throwing the baby, along with the dirty water. So we are throwing the whole concept of agroecology as if it doesn't work and it doesn't. So it was from Dr. Lionel's, statement, we have found very clearly that it was not the timely decision. The decision was taken by politicians, not prepared enough with the, agriculture department. And, so it was very clear that it was problem of process of decision making and also implementation. And I think one thing Dr. Lionel did not mention, and I'm not hearing from anybody, that is the question of like green revolution did not come only with fertilizer. We have to be very clear with that. Green revolution came with particular seeds, the HYV seeds, and those are the laboratory seeds. Those are not the farmers' safe seeds. So like the traditional variety seed, they don't need the dependence on chemical fertilizer and pesticides, the way, it is with the, so I think if we don't talk about the seeds, for example, when we are doing Nayakashi in Bangladesh in 1991, when we started it, at that time, World Bank actually suddenly told the government to stop subsidies. So the fertilizer cost was higher. And so small scale farmers could not buy fertilizer. And that was a very good time for us to, motivate the farmers towards organic agriculture, like reducing dependence on chemical fertilizer. So at a micro level, we could see that, that if it is not the question of only the fertilizer, but then the main question to them was whether they can get the seeds that they were not saving for years. Like we have experience of 50 years of green revolution. So those who were practicing conventional agriculture, they were not saving seeds anymore. So they were much more in trouble. So I think the question of seeds should be brought in. And I think it is because of that, the agrochemical corporations, which are now taking control over not only the agrochemicals, but also the seed market. I'm sure you all have heard about the latest report of ETC Group, Food Barrels, and it shows very clearly that only 4 corporations, Syngenta, Bayer, BASF, and Corteva, control 62% of the world agrochemical market, and top 6 control 78% of the market. And only 2 companies, Syngenta Group and Bayer, control 40% of commercial seeds. So this is something that what Marcos was talking about, that they are now flooded with GMOs. And we also get like the soybean from Argentina is the GMO, and that is coming from Argentina, Brazil, and US. So they don't have the original soybean that they used to have. Now they only have GMOs. So I want to raise this point with much seriousness, that we have to talk about the seeds, that we have to preserve the seeds by the farmers. And that is the key to enter into the organic farming or agroecology. I was very, curious to see one article by Dr. Ravi Chandran of Global Farmer Network, who was telling Indian government to follow Bangladesh as a positive case to have genetically modified BT brinjal, because BT brinjal is not allowed in India. And they're saying that now look at Sri Lanka, they wanted to have organic, they failed. So Indian government should be smart enough to do that. So, but BT brinjal totally failed in Bangladesh, and that didn't work. But these are the people who are taking the advantage of the situation of Sri Lanka and telling us all the wrong stories. In Bangladesh, in the recent days, like in August, Bangladesh government suddenly raised the price of fertilizer and also the diesel. And, we also have to take into account the question of climate change now, even for conventional agriculture or organic agriculture, it will not be the same as before, because of climate change, because this year it didn't rain at all during the monsoon season. So the, farmers needed more fertilizer, at least with whatever they could grow, and also needed to irrigate the monsoon season rice. So this is another thing that we find that conventional farmers are becoming really finding it difficult to continue with fertilizer, diesel, and buying seeds from the market and continue food production. So I think this is one thing I want to say. And also I think, Vandana ji, you raised in the beginning about, in your introductory remarks, that the question is arising, people raise the question when we talk about organic agriculture, whether we can feed the world. I think we have to answer that question. At present, it is the small scale farmers, family farmers around the world who are actually cultivating, and not everyone is doing the conventional agriculture. They are growing a lot of traditional varieties and they are feeding our people, So they are at least feeding part of the, but they are not getting any support, whereas the conventional farmers get support. I think if you give support, we have a right policy and right implementation time, I think organic agriculture can feed the world, and it is going to feed the world. There is no, I would be, would be very strong in saying that that is the future. Agroecological, biodiversity-based farming is our future. Thank you.
Thank you so much for those comments. I think, in our part of the world, you're absolutely right, because big, large-scale industrial farming, we have been trying to keep that away, and it has not really entered in the big way in which it has in the Western world. So for us, it is a matter of protecting the systems that we have just now. We are lucky to have them, and they are feeding our people, but in other parts of the world, it's completely gone. And now the trend is to push it out from here also, because markets are needed. So I think you're absolutely right in pointing that out. Still leaves, I think, questions of macro. There's some questions in the chat, which I'll come to, that are very important also, because we do have to talk in terms of macroeconomics. Most of us are practice per force, because the conditions have not allowed us to do something at scale. And that's why Sri Lanka was important, because it attempted something at country level. So Marcos, over to you for about 7 to 8 minutes. And I will do a third round with the questions, and there I will invite you first, Farida.
Gracias, Vandana. Perdón que anteriormente entendí que me estabas dando la palabra para invertir el orden de las intervenciones y arrancar con mi intervención. Por eso empecé a comentar algunas novedades sobre Argentina. Pero ciertamente vemos muy necesario este aporte del doctor Lionel.
No, Marcos, that was important. So now you can reflect on what you heard from Lionel and so on. So it was very good that you talked, because Argentina is a very good case study.
Bueno, efectivamente,
for all of us.
a partir de lo que comenté anteriormente, crecientemente se busca la transición a otro modelo basado en la agroecología y la soberanía alimentaria. Los pueblos crecientemente se están organizando, en primer lugar, para intentar prohibir, restringir, limitar o alejar, en función de las distintas relaciones de fuerzas locales, el uso de los agrotóxicos y, sobre todo, avanzar en la agroecología. Y la agroecología está avanzando a pasos agigantados en nuestro país, a pesar de todas las deficiencias estructurales de las que mencionábamos anteriormente, tanto a nivel de agricultura urbana, como la agricultura periurbana, como en el plano intensivo y extensivo rural. Hoy ya hay más de 1.500.000 hectáreas en el país destinadas a la agroecología, y si a eso le agregamos la agricultura orgánica, que es muy importante en Argentina. Argentina es el octavo exportador mundial de orgánicos, y esto muchas veces no se sabe, ¿no? Sobre todo cuando nos quieren hacer pensar que no podemos producir sin agrotóxicos. Claramente Argentina puede revelar que eso es una quimera, un mito, ¿no? Y la agricultura biodinámica también. Ahora, lo importante es justamente asumir el desafío político de construir una transición. Decíamos que tenemos un modelo de revolución verde y de revolución de este paquete tecnológico del que hablaba Farida, de transgénicos dependientes de venenos, de agrotóxicos y de fertilizantes sintéticos, que hace que este sea un modelo aún hoy muy dependiente, ¿no? Veneno dependiente, un modelo, como diría el actual director nacional de Agroecología, adicto a ese paquete tecnológico. Y por más que queramos colectivamente transformar este sistema, no podemos salir de la noche a la mañana, ¿no? Si de la noche a la mañana quisiéramos prohibir en todo el territorio nacional los transgénicos, los agrotóxicos, los fertilizantes sintéticos, sin duda que las consecuencias serían muy, muy complejas, ¿no? Lo importante es tomar la decisión política de que hay que cambiar, ¿no? El cambio de modelo es necesario, es urgente, es posible y podemos hacerlo, ¿no? E impulsar políticas públicas de transición ordenada, justa, hacia la agroecología. Y en ese sentido, compartirles también que esta transformación ya está en marcha en nuestro país a partir de distintas políticas públicas en todos los niveles de gobierno. En primer lugar, los gobiernos locales, porque los gobiernos locales, los gobiernos municipales, son los más sensibles justamente a la conflictividad social asociada al uso de los agrotóxicos y están empezando a adoptar políticas públicas de transición a la agroecología. Ya hay más de 90 municipios que expresaron públicamente su voluntad de establecer políticas públicas ordenadas, reitero, graduales, progresivas, de transición a la agroecología. Ya hay algunos gobiernos provinciales, ¿no?, que es el siguiente nivel de gobierno, que tienen leyes de fomento de la agroecología, políticas públicas de agroecología, ¿no? Provincias, ya hay 4 provincias que están yendo en ese camino. Y también como respondiendo a esta demanda social creciente por la necesidad de transformar el sistema alimentario hacia la agroecología y la sobrealimentaria, hay hoy ya una Dirección Nacional de Agroecología, y cuyo director es Eduardo Cerdá, que justamente viene de una construcción previa que se llama la Red Nacional de Municipios y Comunidades que fomentan la agroecología. ¿Cuál es la misión justamente de esa Dirección Nacional? Una transición ordenada, gradual, hacia la agroecología, visibilizando lo que ya existe, que es mucho, fomentando, ¿no?, a través de distintos instrumentos que haya una transición a la agroecología y sobre todo protegiendo, ¿no?, brindando una protección efectiva o intentando proteger a esas producciones agroecológicas. En ese escenario que estamos viviendo, que estamos transitando hoy, de dos maneras, si se quiere, antitéticas, conflictivas de concebir lo agrario, se ha colado el debate sobre Sri Lanka. ¿Y cómo se ha presentado el debate sobre Sri Lanka? Bueno, justamente como una advertencia de que si vamos hacia la agricultura orgánica o si vamos a la agricultura agroecológica, vamos a terminar como Sri Lanka, ¿no? ¿Y esto en boca de quién? Justamente en boca de los máximos exponentes, defensores de este modelo agronegocio transgénico en nuestro país. Los medios de comunicación que defienden este agronegocio transgénico, los CEOs de las corporaciones químicas que dominan el paquete tecnológico dominante en nuestro país, como decía Farida, no sin ir más lejos, el CEO de Syngenta en Argentina, Antonio Aracre, se pasea por todos los medios de comunicación diciendo: ojo con ir a la agricultura orgánica o agroecológica porque vamos a terminar como Sri Lanka, ¿no? Hablando de, nuevamente, el riesgo de hambruna, el riesgo de crisis social, ¿no? Y fíjense cómo también la científica que desarrolló el trigo transgénico resistente, reitero, al glufosinato de amonio, un herbicida que es 15 veces más tóxico que el glifosato, que se llama Raquel Chan, y esto quiero citarla para ser fiel, ¿no? Dice: el 29 de agosto de este año dijo, en el único país, justamente Sri Lanka, en donde se prohibieron los agrotóxicos, asumió un presidente prohibiendo el uso de los agrotóxicos para la producción, cumpliendo una promesa electoral. Y fíjense lo que dice: duró 1 año y medio, lo echaron a patadas porque fundió al país porque no había nada para comer. Entonces, son esos actores, ese conglomerado químico que domina justamente este paquete tecnológico de este modelo agronegocio transgénico, los que están instalando este discurso simplista, reduccionista sobre la crisis de Sri Lanka en nuestro país. Frente a eso, por supuesto, lo que decimos es: por supuesto que podemos alimentar a todo el mundo con agroecología, por supuesto que podemos alimentar a nuestro país y producir alimentos sanos, seguros y soberanos, no solo para alimentar adecuadamente a nuestro pueblo, sino para compartirlo con otros pueblos y otros mercados que lo van a demandar, pero eso requiere, frente a un modelo que aún hoy es muy dependiente, muy adicto a este paquete tecnológico, asumir una transición justa, ordenada y planificada desde las políticas públicas en todos los niveles del Estado.
Thanks very much, Marcos. I think that the political challenges to making the shift, even with good planning, with good, political participation, people's participation, is very high because of the big money concerned, and that is what you and Farida have highlighted so sharply. There are some questions that have come up in the chat box as well as in the question and answer box, and there's one that I thought was very interesting, and I'm going to put it to Dr. Lionel, who's been patiently hearing all of us for some time now. Essentially, I think it's important to recognize that Sri Lanka has been going through a severe economic crisis for some time. It was not something that happened just because the fertilizer ban came up. And I think that question also attends to that. It's a question by Finbar Horgan in the chat box. And the question goes like this: how much did the government's financial difficulties, not made public at the time, contribute to the forced transition to organic? Now, here the question is really, was there a forced contribution to organic that would have helped the financial challenge? So that is something that factually has to be answered. Perhaps Dr. Lionel, you could do that, but also in general, everything that has happened, I mean, is it not slightly wrong to attribute all of it to the overnight ban? So I think that these two issues, if you could just reflect upon, Dr. Lionel, would you be able to unmute yourself and just respond to these two issues? And then I'll come to the chat box. So ongoing economic crisis was there in Sri Lanka. How much did that contribute to everything? And also, did that force in some way the political decision to ban the fertilizers? And that is really what the question is in the chat box. Dr. Lionel? Yeah, there you are.
Now, ours is a very complex situation. It has combined with a lot of dimensions. You can't apply a simple equation to give solutions, as it's so complex. And we are in a big crisis. No gas, no electricity. Even a few hours before this meeting, there was a electricity cut. And also no gas, no fuel, and no money to import fertilizer. So the problem will be continuing, and the future is very bleak at the moment. So the government is expecting to get loans. And from our side, we insist that at least to have food in the country, we need to grow more food, not only paddy, but also vegetables, cereals, then legumes. Likewise, there are quite a number. We have a very, very diverse crops in the country. And always say that we should be self-sufficient in rice. But if the slogan was changed to, we should be self-sufficient in food. So we have many. Now for many years, even in my case, we used to eat different types of the diascorias, colocasias, alocasias as food. Now it's all gone. And when you even there are many different types of food is grown in China systems. That is the shifting cultivation. The shifting cultivation is banned in country Sri Lanka now. they grow the same crops in the same field continuously. So these things are, I mean, has to be changed. Only
Right.
way is to apply agroecological principles. Now to us, agroecology has a broad meaning.
We'll have to, yeah, I'll just have to request you to just keep it brief because we're in the question answer session. So I'm just waiting to pose some other questions. You brought up a very important point, but just please finish your point and yeah. Yeah, Dr. Lionel, just please finish off your point, the point that you were making.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And now the problem is, the solution is, to us, is agroecology, but there is no person to take the leadership. Now, India, I have the experience with Padma Shri Subhash Palekar. He's a leader. He's a farmer leader. And now he has taken the responsibility of promoting zero budget natural farming and cover southern areas in India. We don't have such a leader in the country to promote agroecology or even
Right.
organic agriculture. So these are the, I mean,
right.
No, yeah, we want leaders, we want people who are knowledgeable to implement this program, organic agriculture, not the businessmen, not the multinationals. So we want to have, so there are quite a few people who can take the leadership in the country.
Right. Thank you. Thank you, Dr. Lionel. I think you have raised a very important point about what comprises food and what is food security. It's not just rice, not just cereals. There are many other things that need to be brought in, and that's a very important point. Thank you so much. And you've also answered one of the questions in the chat box, which says, which is the best alternative way for in Sri Lanka? Also, some people asking, what is the way forward? I think just now the crisis is very severe, and we are all with you in solidarity. So, way out and all that is something that will actually take some time, because just now it's a matter of survival for Sri Lankans, and we get that from you, and we hear that from you, and we really are there in solidarity. We really feel for what Sri Lanka is going through. Thank you. I'm just going to go to some more questions. There have been some questions about basically climate and environment, and including things like how do we tackle plastic, using garbage, and really trying to enlarge the whole issue of how agriculture is going to fit with the larger ecological systems that we have. So if anybody would like to comment on that, I'm just going to bring up some of the questions and then just go quickly to the panelists to see. You can also, panelists, could you please also open the question and answer chat box, question answer box, and just have a look at what kind of questions are there. Of course, there are questions on the agro industries and the politics behind the whole thing, the money, those kinds of questions are there. And there's one question from India saying, how do you see India as farmers are in greed and not seeing nature? So some of us are involved with farmers movements in India. Maybe some response can come about what farmers in India are seeing. Is it really greed, or is it a lack of support to shift, and so on? So some of those questions are there. And there are not very many specific questions as such. I think I would just like to add also that if there's any economic perspective on how organic farming would work. I mean, like in India, we're working on social security schemes like the public distribution system, the midday meal, and trying to see how that would fit with decentralized food production, marketing, usage, and there are ways to do that, and that would provide important markets and important kind of support to prices for farmers. But it needs, again, infrastructural support. So we have a different kind of challenge with how these foods could be marketed and distributed in a much more decentralized way. So if anybody has any reflections on any of those. So I'll start with Farida, and we maybe a couple of minutes each.
Okay. I think it's very, I was reading the questions in the chat box and also Q&A box. But I'm now mixing everything up to say my last point, is that first of all, I think we have to really think about getting out of this whole green revolution paradigm and also industrial food production system. There is no way we can believe that they are going to feed the world and that they are actually going to cause more diseases, more harm to the small farmers, and there will not be farmers anymore. And also I think one participant raised a very important question about land, monopolization of land. I think this is I think he's Dinesh. And so I think this is very, very important. So we are talking about only like inputs, fertilizer, pesticide, and I also want to take seriously the question of seeds. And I think the land question comes also very seriously here, because now the land is used for everything else, but not for food production. So this is very important. And also, like even tobacco cultivation is extended in the food crop fields. So, what kind of food security you're talking about? Another thing Dr. Lionel mentioned, and I want to add to is the point, is the diversity of food, culturally, appropriate food. So we don't eat the same thing as the industrial food production gives us. It's only few staple foods, few vegetables, few fruits. That is not the food to all the people in the world. So the people living in the hilly areas, living in the coastal areas, living all over in different parts of the world, have their own cultural needs of the food, social needs of the food. And those are grown by the farmers. And it is also, I want to bring in women's knowledge to it also. And, with industrial food production, we cannot meet those needs at all. We have 15,000 varieties of rice, and Naikishi farmers have like 3,000 varieties, and many of them are specifically needed for medicinal purposes. Some are needed for particular events, like even for puja and Eid and everything. So these are very, very important things to remember. And I think monoculture of food, reducing the diversity of food is going to pose another, threat to our food system. So it's not a question of only fertilizer versus organic agriculture, and organic agroecology is much broader term than organic agriculture. So I think we have to, and also we have to say no to GMOs. In Bangladesh, they are trying to impose more GMOs, and with false science and false knowledge. But I think it's very important that we have to say no to GMOs as well.
Thank you so much, Farida, for reinforcing again the issues of food diversity for land use. And Dr. Dinesh Abroll has been making many comments on the chat box, and you picked up on one or two of them. I think people would be reading them. You also reflected on, because there's a specific question from Faris Ahmed, saying it would be great to hear about how youth and women's movements can pick up and build agroecology. You see, finally, if the power holders are going in one direction, it's only the people and people's movements that are going to shift that. And I think that all of us we are all part of such movements. So we also need to reflect on how we build the movement to support the politics. I mean, we have a government that took a political decision, but was not supported by people's movements and understanding by the farmers and so on. So this is an important question. I'll move to, sorry, who should I be moving to? Oh, I started with Farida. So let me put now Ramu in the middle. So Dr. Ramu, would you like to make any comments on the questions that you've seen in the question and answer or the chat box?
Yeah, I think
2 minutes.
as
Yeah?
Dinesh, yeah, as Dinesh pointed out, I think when we talk about agroecology, it's much beyond organic farming. It's not just organic farming. So how do we move towards more sustainable production systems? And then how do we recreate the entire ecosystem? So be it research, education, markets, people's institutions, and give decision making to the people rather than actually government deciding whether moving towards organic farming, natural farming, or conventional agriculture, whenever they realize it is important. So it's actually giving the decision making to the people's institutions is something which is very, very important. And that transition can only happen if we have a long-term plan, and then public investments going into it. These two are very, very critical, and all of us together, I think we need to move towards that rather than trying to push our own opinions onto the people. I think that's what will help. So people's movements also have to look at how this transition can be enabled. So an ecosystem which enables this transition is what we all need to look into. So that's what can take us into the new paradigm. Yeah, thank you.
Thank you so much. There are some other new questions that have cropped up. I'm just reading them quickly. I asked the panelists what strategies they think are effective to stop the financialization of agribusiness. So that is one specific question that I can see. I'm not going into some very technical questions because we really don't have the space. This is a very complex and technical discussion. I mean, the issues are very, very highly technical, and the micro understanding of everything is also very important. But unfortunately, in 1.5 hours, I think we cannot really get into that. Maybe we'll do a subsequent follow-on for that. So now coming to you, Marcos.
Gracias, Vandana. Bueno, tomo esto del final. Efectivamente, asistimos a nivel global y en cada uno de nuestros países, en Sri Lanka, en India, en Bangladesh y en Argentina y en todo nuestra casa común, dos maneras antitéticas de concebir la vida y lo agrario. El sistema agroindustrial, que genera ganancias para cada vez menos actores, y centralmente los actores financieros que dominan el sistema agroindustrial dominante, y el paradigma antitético, contrapuesto y superador de ese sistema agroindustrial, que es, como bien decía Farida, el paradigma de la soberanía alimentaria. El modelo agroindustrial dominante está sostenido por grandes intereses económicos. Hablamos hoy con bastante detenimiento de ese oligopolio químico, pero también hay que agregar a la industria alimentaria, la industria de la maquinaria pesada, la industria digital, la industria farmacéutica, y detrás de todo eso, los fondos de inversión, bancos, compañías financieras, lubricando, financiando, especulando, sosteniendo financieramente todo este poder concentrado. Y por supuesto, tanto poder concentrado tiene ramificaciones en la ciencia, en la academia, en los medios y en todos y cada uno de nuestros gobiernos. Frente a eso, el desafío de construir poder popular lo suficientemente fuerte para que las políticas públicas vayan en el sentido que deseamos, que es en el sentido de la agroecología y en el sentido de la soberanía alimentaria como paradigma. Y en ese sentido, la agroecología, como bien se dijo acá, va mucho más allá de una mera sustitución de insumos, ¿no? La agroecología es práctica, es movimiento social y es ciencia, y eso requiere la convergencia colectiva de un sinnúmero de actores que empujamos colectivamente para que eso sea una realidad y no prime, como prima en gran parte de nuestros territorios, los intereses de ese puñado tan concentrado que gana con este sistema agroindustrial dominante. Entonces, el principal desafío a nivel local, regional, nacional y global es tejer redes para construir ese poder popular lo suficientemente fuerte para que ese paradigma de la soberanía alimentaria prime en nuestros territorios y nos ofrezca un futuro posible a nosotros y a nuestros hijos. Muchas gracias.
Thank you so much, Marcos. On the farmers' question, somebody talking about greed amongst farmers. When I introduced the panelists, I told you that all of them, in fact, are working with farmers' organizations. And so it's not as though farmers are not on board. In fact, many are. Yes, the scale is not necessarily enormous, but they are also on board because they're finding it viable. And as Ramu said, we need to leave decision-making much more decentralized to people, but the support needs to come from the state and the government, because what happens then is people are left to their own devices, as happened in Sri Lanka, and they can't cope. So decision-making has to be decentralized, but support, financial support, and so on and so forth really must come from the taxpayers' money, which should not be going into industrial form systems of agriculture. So I'm going to close with two slightly new points, points that haven't come in from the point of view of public health and public health nutrition. I think it's, we see in all the advocacy decisions in the, larger global institutions now that do not also take into account, some of these are better understood, what we've been discussing today, but what is happening to animal husbandry and sources of, animal sources of protein. This is not being acknowledged and discussed as much. So here again, in our part of the world, the systems are very different from these large scale, factories in which animals are bred for production and marketed. And there's a whole policy environment that is going against non-vegetarianism, which is hurting our situation, because the poorest of the poor, the most marginalized, the most malnourished need animal sources of protein, and there the production is completely home-based. And it's, so it's very different from this large scale, the vision of this large scale, big animal, factories that we're talking about. So I would say that we need to also expand to think about, when we talk of food security, that we must also talk about systems for animal-based proteins and animal husbandry. The other thing is that Farida mentioned that what we're doing now, which is this monoculture, the lack of dietary diversity, GMs, and also in mandatory fortification, etc., which causes monoculturing and centralization. What it's also not doing is serving the issue of malnutrition. We are going on and on talking about malnutrition without recognizing that it is the food systems that we are arguing for, which is the these decentralized local food systems. They're what going to combat malnutrition, not these highly technical centralizing processes that are being funded by large donor agencies. We can name the international players involved that are being supported by the international governance on health and nutrition. We heard how WHO made certain recommendations and so on. So it is also that malnutrition cannot be done away with unless we shift the food systems to a much more diverse, much more natural, much more healthy, much more toxin-free, kind of system. So with all that, and finally, I think we didn't speak so much about how it would affect inequality, income inequality, the informal sector. We did talk about land ownership, but it's also simply it's the poorest of the poor who are being further marginalized by these large industrial systems of that we're setting up. So if you want to do away with poverty, it can't happen through the current paradigm of the food system. So I think that is really the reason why so many of us from diverse backgrounds are coming together to make this kind of investment. And that is really the kind of conglomeration that you have seen today. We have lawyers, we have doctors, we have agricultural scientists, and we have people who are working directly with farmers and food production organizations. So we have that kind of a conglomerate here, and we have a far richer group in the attendees list. And if you've been looking at the chat box, you can see that a very rich discussion has happened in many different languages in the chat box. And I thank all the attendees for making this contribution, for being engaged with this panel discussion. You have really enriched the whole discussion greatly. And I hope that we are all leaving this 1.5 hours kind of feeling a bit happy, firstly, to be together and to be in solidarity, to be talking amongst each other. There are also debates. People have raised issues about whether this is the way that we should interpret things and so on. And there have been provocative statements in the chat box, as well as by the panelists, that will provoke us to think more and to debate and discuss more. So with heartfelt thanks to all the panelists here, and especially an expression of solidarity to the people of Sri Lanka, and with the hope that we're all going to continue to work together for what we believe in, and with the hope that we're doing this with better understanding, and with the understanding that we need a lot of hard work and homework still to go. So let us all be together for that. Thank you so much. I'm going to hand it over to Deepika to finally close.
Yeah, thank you everybody for joining. Thanks to all the speakers and Vandana for agreeing to moderate. Thank you, Dr. Lionel, for, we know we had some technical issues, but we figured it out later. Thank you, Dr. Ramu, Marcos, Farida, and I'll also thank the interpreters who were interpreting for us today. And also, lastly, our colleagues from PHM Sri Lanka who helped us in conceptualizing this webinar, and also colleagues from India who, Nachiket, Rohit, who supported us with the webinar and with the speakers. And we really hope this conversation will contribute positively to the ongoing debates on agroecology and transitions to just food system. Thank you. Yeah. Bye. Mm-hmm.